Welcome to Inside Missions, a production of Maranatha Volunteers International, offering an in-depth look at the people, the cultures, and the countries where Maranatha is working. I'm Dustin Comm, and today we have two Maranatha marketing staff members back from the field where they were producing a couple of TV episodes for our television program, Maranatha Mission Stories. So we're going to debrief a little bit on your guys' trip here and get the lowdown on what it's like to produce a television episode in another country. So welcome, Leo Macias and Sidney Needles.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Leo, you're normally in the background behind the scenes on this podcast. You have engineered this whole studio and the setup that we have here, and I know you'd rather be back there, not on the camera. So
maybe.
Thank you for, joining us here in front. I think people will be interested to get to know someone who, makes the show happen. You're a cinematographer and editor for Maranatha Mission Stories. And Sidney, you serve as a field producer on the TV show. Sidney, tell us just where you guys went and where you got back from. What was the main purpose there briefly? We'll get into all the details.
So our main purpose was to capture the story of Pine Hill Adventist Academy, which is in the Mizoram state in India. And so along with that trip, we were also going to visit some water well sites where Maranatha is drilling. And so our travels stayed pretty much on the eastern side, Andhra Pradesh state, and then up into Mizoram. And on trips like this, our main goal is episodes of television. So that's kind of in the forefront of our mind. And then there's a bunch of other little things in the back of our mind that we need for other marketing deliverables. But that was the main goal.
Very good. And I should also point out, if you're not watching the audio, you're not watching the video, you should sometime, because Leo has constructed a mobile editing / recording suite here at the podcast table. He is going to be a guest and produce this whole thing.
It is an empty studio besides us three.
Nobody else here. I don't.
Very
Leo
self-produced.
Is very talented putting all this together here. Your job as a cinematographer on these trips, I think people can understand it. You have a camera, you're filming. Sidney, it's a little maybe nebulous what a field producer does on a trip. Obviously, Leo, you do a lot more than just filming, but Sidney, how would you describe what a field producer does on one of these trips?
Nebulous is a good word, because that's how it was for me when I first started out, because I mean, still is a little bit to this day, because I don't have a lot of experience doing that type of thing. And so it's been a learning process, but basically I'm going to be the one writing the script for the episode of television. So I'm kind of in control of the storyline. And so when we first get there, my job is to talk to as many people I can, talk to key figures, try to collect information, set up those interviews, and basically just direct the story. And so that has been my role, and it's still something, like I said, that I'm kind of learning about and hopefully improving on. But I feel like hopefully each trip I learn more and more about, what a field producer does. And
we should say you joined Maranatha in 2023, is that right?
Yes.
Like kind of late summer, fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been on several trips, but like Leo's been, you don't even know how many trips and how many countries you've been to. But so Sidney, you're still like, this was which number?
What trip was this? So I did like a little tutorial trip with you and Christina, our director of television, and then I think this was the third trip after that I've
where you were
produced.
solo producing. Yeah.
It's a big trip. It's a big trip to go all the way across the world to India in particular. What kind of preparations are you guys doing, whether it's with your own like expertise, things you have to worry about, just traveling there? What are you doing before you leave on a trip like this?
Well, I can talk about it from the gear side of things. Every country brings its own challenges, and every country, even just customs and what you can bring in, the list is different. So kind of since we've been to a lot of these countries before, you just kind of start gaining that knowledge on what you can bring and what you can't, and working around what you won't be able to bring.
Like drones often are
drones, like
restrictions.
Do I need to bring a smaller camera because there's a place I can't really run a big camera or bigger camera, and and then like, should I bring a gimbal or should I bring some kind of a stabilizer? Like, our tripod bag is also very large, and sometimes it gets lost, and it's
I was going to ask, how do you make it through an airport?
It's tough because you have all your the normal clothes that you would have on a 1 or 2 week trip, and then you have all the gear that takes up really most of the space in your luggage.
You'll find Leo with pushing a cart usually that has like 5 different containers on it. Yeah,
it's funny because usually Leo is like bogged down with all this equipment, and then I usually get like one little camera.
Like
I have like all my personal effects and then one little camera, pulling my weight.
You could just use a smartphone. Maybe you should consider doing that sometime.
You know what? Next time we'll see what happens.
We have actually done that before.
We did.
We had when there was no other option because of restrictions. We did do that one time. Serious question though. Why is it important? Because everyone has smartphones that take really good video. Why is it important on these kinds of trips, producing these kinds of episodes for television, to use professional, high quality equipment?
That's a good question because, you watch the world and a lot of people do a lot on phones, and their phones are a lot more powerful than they used to be, and you can get nicer footage. If you know what you're doing, you can get nicer footage out of them than you used to be able to. So I do recognize that, but as someone that does it for a living, I think the reason for using professional gear is the control that you have over the image, and so you're continually making decisions while you're shooting on your exposure triangle, on how something looks exactly. You can make a lot of creative decisions that are a little tougher to make on the fly with a phone. Also, a professional camera is going to have a ton of buttons that you can customize, and really, so there are a lot of things that you could change on a camera on the fly, and if you had on an iPhone, it's kind of tough to do so.
Yeah.
So I think it's about the control mostly.
So you guys get your visas for India, you get all packed, you're heading there, you're pushing your car through the airport. Do you guys do okay sleeping on overnight flights, or is that a rough?
I thought I did. We had 2 back-to-back, like 10-hour flights on this one.
Long. Yeah.
And you can, even if you sleep perfectly for 10 hours for one of them, you have another 10 hours that you probably won't be able to sleep. So yeah, there's definitely those moments where you keep checking the track my flight on your monitor, and it's like, wow, still 6 hours to go? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Gives me anxiety just thinking about that right now, because I don't sleep on planes at all. I'm terrible at it.
Yeah. I got to be horizontal, otherwise I really can't fall asleep. So you get, I assume, into the capital city of Delhi. Is that where you land? And I assume it's middle of the night.
Yes.
So what happens? What happens from there?
Well, on this trip, we landed in Delhi, had like 3 hours to not even 3 hours. I think we had like an hour at a hotel to shower, and then we were getting on another flight to take us to the region where we were going to visit our first water well site. So coming off of a really long flight, it was just up and go after that as well.
No rest for the weary.
Rest for the weary.
So you get on a domestic flight. What is it like flying on an Indian airline?
Man, they bring you food quickly. I'm trying to think of the differences.
Yeah, we always got food, even on like 1 hour flights, which I don't think is like a sandwich, whereas like in
even
the US
regional,
you get like crackers or something. But
I
would say it's pretty similar to domestic flights in the US. Maybe smaller aircrafts, but overall, pretty similar.
So you are in Andhra Pradesh. What's the goal there when you get on the ground in Andhra Pradesh?
Our goal for Andhra Pradesh was our water well efforts. And so there we visited a site called Rajidi, and Maranatha had built a church there in 2004, and we had drilled a water well there. So we visited it after the well had been drilled to capture the story of the village through, like, from the beginning of their struggle without the well all the way through to now, how does it feel? You've had this well for a while, what's it like? So Yeah. So when we got there, it's interesting because like the first thing I start to do is to just try and speak to everyone to try to piece together what's happening, because before the trip, I get like little paragraphs about the site and things like that. But like when you get there and actually talk to people, sometimes there's other factors that don't squeeze into a little paragraph, to try to get the full picture of the story. And then at the same time, you're paying attention to how people speak. Like, does this person have a lot to say where they could be good at being interviewed, or is this person a key part of the story? And all this is being done through a translator, which is difficult at times. But thankfully we had some Maranatha crew members who were able to help us with translating, and that's very helpful because they kind of understand what we're looking for too, so that's a bit helpful.
And normally we have a Maranatha staff that's sort of dedicated to us for the whole trip. Did you have one person for that trip?
Yes, we did have one person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you pull up to this site, and you kind of talked about it earlier. You start going off and talking to people. Leo, what are you doing when you first arrive on a site? Are you kind of waiting to feel things out, or is it, depending on the site, do you know, okay, I got to get these shots anyway, so I'm going to start shooting?
Yeah, if Sidney tells me, that as soon as she tells me there's a story or something, which usually is the case, then I'll start getting at least general footage of the area, B-roll of things around. And then when she has more of an idea what the story is, then I start honing in on the person, the subject, or whatever. Yeah.
Or sometimes we might start off with an interview, and then okay, this person, I definitely
that's
need to
very
get a lot
helpful.
of shots of them.
Yeah.
You talked about having to work through translators. What is it like doing an interview in another language?
It's hard because not only do I need to be translated to them, but I want to know kind of what they said back, because I need to know, like, does that really answer my question, or is it even kind of said in a way that's going to be helpful? Because I'm thinking about, okay, words on paper, like how is this going to, end up in the episode? So it's difficult. I would say something I've learned in the process of working through a translator is I've had to learn to not be afraid to say, hey, let's ask them to say this again. Or sometimes they'll say like a whole bunch, and the translator will say like one sentence, they'll be like, can you like elaborate a little more? Like, did they say anything else? That kind of thing. So just learning to ask a few more questions in that scenario to try to get the information I need.
Have you found that people understand the angle that we're coming at? Because usually we're coming at, if we're doing a volunteer mission trip project, we're just covering the project and the work that they're doing, maybe the story of need there. But on this kind of a trip, you're showing the need and why Maranatha got involved in the first place. And sometimes it's not apparent to the local person what exactly we want them to say that's going to illustrate the need of, to them, for instance, in this case of water, like they might be used to collecting water somewhere for years and decades, and it's just normal. And we want them to talk about like how hard it is, their daily life. So anyway, was that a struggle at all to get them to talk about something that would show the need, or did they understand?
I think I would say that the level of understanding of the type of answers we're looking for is probably pretty low overall. I kind of like that because I like people to just say what they have to say, and just see what we get from that, because I like the authentic feel, I do remember at Rajidi specifically, we were interviewing this woman, and she started sharing a story about being sick when she was a few years younger. It didn't directly relate to, their plight without water, but it's a part of her life. It's a part of the story, and I'm very grateful that she shared that piece also. And while sharing the story, she starts crying, and our translator, and once she started crying, like I started, kind of asking more questions to try to like hone in on why she's emotional and that kind of thing, because that's what you have to do. But our translator was like, she's crying, like like you're hurting her type of thing.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like I think part of the tears were, I think it feels good to express the pain that you've maybe, you know, held inside for so long. And so, and being able to have an interview with somebody where they feel safe enough to cry on camera and share those genuine feelings, whether the story is directly related to their plight without water or not, like, I think that's great to capture that piece of their experience.
It's kind of a dance, isn't it? Right? Like you are asking them to give something of them, and then you're receiving that, and it doesn't show up on camera, but like the rapport that you build with someone during that interview in a short amount of time, like actually can open them up to talk about more things. It's a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you guys are covering this well. What do you do for lunch that first day when you're filming?
Did we eat lunch?
When did we eat lunch?
No.
Not the well, right?
Because
we ate before, I think, at that one restaurant.
You left Delhi. You get to Andhra Pradesh. You had some food maybe before you got to the well place.
All the days kind of meld together, so we're trying to think of...
I do remember, this isn't your specific question, our first meal at the Delhi airport.
Oh, man.
We got Indian food from an airport, like, restaurant, like, kind of mall food court
fast
type.
Foodie, you know.
You wouldn't expect its quality to be so good. Maybe it's just because, like, we were starved and tired of being on an airplane, but, like, that food was so good. We were, like... the last ones to board our flight because we were like eating up every.
We had to rush to our plane.
We had to rush to our plane because we were enjoying that meal. It was so good. But yeah, I would say in India overall we ate pretty good. The food is delicious, but the meal you're asking about, I think we ate at a restaurant.
So that was like our last restaurant we ate at.
Is there a restaurant in where you're going, or do we have to bring like snack bag lunches? What did you guys do throughout the trip?
Yeah, you never really know when your last like real meal's gonna be. Yeah. And the staff, the local Maranatha workers are amazing. Like
they're
definitely
good at knowing what restaurants are good.
What's decent to eat at, and sometimes, you know, we ate the same thing a lot. Yeah. Throughout this trip, I would say. Yeah, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, right?
Yes.
Day after day.
End of our, the Mizoram part of the trip. Yeah.
Like it was the same kind of food?
Yeah.
Same meal.
Dal, rice, that kind of thing.
Chapati. Was good food.
It was good, yeah.
Yeah.
What vehicle were you driving around in, and how does the vehicle can it affect your work, Leo?
The vehicle.
Specifically, I'm thinking with like the space that you have to work with.
Yeah, you're right. We really like a big trunk because our tripod bag and all that stuff is really long. And if we can't fit that in there lengthwise, like transverse to the car, then all the other gear that we have to continue to access is really difficult to access. And in that case, then sometimes we put camera gear in the back seat of the car instead and just open a door and pull a lens out or pull something out. It's just nice to have something, to have a setup where you can easily go in and out constantly, because you're changing lenses, you're changing cameras, your mics, whatever.
And otherwise you're shuffling gear around, or you're putting stuff on the ground maybe to have enough space. So.
Which is not great for dust because you're trying to keep everything clean. But then again, the places that we go aren't always, they're always dusty and there's dirt in the air. So yeah.
I was going to ask, while you're at that well site, you're doing interviews, he's getting B-roll. Is there any shots where he's focused in getting his shots, but you see something happening, and you say, Leo, go get that? Is there any kind of moments where you're telling him to get a certain shot?
Yeah, there are those moments. I think what's nice for someone with a little bit less experience like myself is working with Leo. A lot of the time, like, he has built that instinct in his mind to, like, when he sees something, he kind of knows, like, okay, this is good, like, to go get that and stuff. But if I see something too, yeah, for sure, I'll tap him on the shoulder and be like, hey, let's get this. Because if we can get a authentic shot, a genuine shot, without having to, like, pose it or anything like that, that's always better.
Yeah. Did you have to do a little recreation of, what things used to be like at this site?
Yeah, this site, we retraced their walk.
Not kind of acting, but it's recreation.
Yeah, demonstrating.
Demonstrating.
We
Yeah,
had them demonstrate
Yeah.
their hike for water. Before they had this well, they got it from a stream that was like half a mile away, so it was like a mile round trip. And they had their buckets. I remember it's always a big kind of scene when we're there. A bunch of people come and they want to see what's happening. Sometimes that is hard because we don't want crowds necessarily. And so when we had them set up to go start this hike to get water, like the men were there too because they were excited. They want to like be on camera too. And we had to ask them like, okay, if you're not typically the one getting water, maybe sit this one out. So it was just had the women there, their buckets, had them walk all the way to the river, and we got some great shots of that. So
Go ahead.
Sorry, it's just like you were talking about the acting versus recreating, and I do like we try to be really sensitive to not making a show out of it, and we're really trying to show the authentic life of these people, and it's important to us that we don't massage it too much or just make it look like it actually does. And when they ask us, what do you want us to do? We're like, they have a tough time. We're just like, we're telling them, just do what you usually do. Just do what you usually do. And it's hard for them sometimes to figure that out because they just do it. Yeah. But when we're there, it's a tough call. But.
So you are thinking about this whole story. You're kind of thinking of a story arc as well. There's lots of logistics that you are, processing in your mind all at the same time. Plus, I'm asking you to take social media video on your cell phone. You have to take photos. You're also thinking about print stories that you might write later on these topics or these places that you're visiting. So how do you balance all that? It seems overwhelming.
First of all, print. I love print because you get some good quality photos and then you use words to convey the meaning, and you can pull those words straight from your mind and onto the page. With television or with social media, you have to actually get shots of what you want to portray. So I think that's been the biggest struggle for me. Juggling all those things, knowing that like we need vertical shots for social media versus horizontal for TV is difficult. And it's a lot. I think this trip was probably the hardest for me because we were visiting 3 different water sites and a school. And so the goal was ideally 3 episodes, maybe like 2.5. And so that's like 2 different storylines with all those things that you're trying to get. So it's difficult. How I balance it, I don't know.
It's hard to focus. And then,
at the end of the day, like my brain, like I remember telling Leo, like he'll ask me a question, but like I've used everything I have. Like I don't know. Like
I'm at 0.
Yeah, at 0.
Ask me
Give
tomorrow.
me a minute. Yeah, like it's a lot.
So you get the well story, and then you go on to a couple of church dedications in the same state. What is a church dedication like?
Leo's been to a lot. He could take those questions.
I've been to a lot of church. They're definitely celebratory. They come in and put flowers around you. And at some churches, they have instruments and they dance around in a circle, and then singing songs. And then they usually have a march from that area to the church through town. So it makes a big spectacle, and it's really fun to watch and also experience. Yeah.
So for these dedications that you were doing, did you spend a lot of time interviewing church members about their prior worship situation, or were you more documenting and not telling as in-depth a story as you might otherwise? Or
so for these, it was 2 church dedications, so they were pretty close together, so it was kind of a combined celebration. The 2 churches our boss Julie had visited last year, and kind of collected in-depth stories about like where they worshiped before, the people there in the congregation. And so we had a lot of that good footage, good stories. At the dedication, I wanted to focus more on interviewing the church leaders who were there because it's convenient, to get some big picture quotes about the impact of churches. We were also able to interview one man who is Hindu and who noticed the new building, the new church, and started it. attending the church because he noticed a new structure. So that was kind of a good story that illustrates the impact that having a nice structure can have in the community. It just brings more legitimacy to the faith community.
All right, flipping the page. I have all sorts of things I want to talk to you guys about here. Leo, you have set up some interviews in some pretty crazy settings around the world. And obviously, sometimes people just see what's on the screen when they're watching it. They can't see what's happening behind them or even to the side. Sometimes there's people that are, crouching, doing the interviewing, or in a precarious situation in between, I don't know. Was there any challenging interviews you had to set up visually on this trip?
On this trip, yes, actually. We were in a little town outside the school that we were filming at, and we were up high, and the town is beautiful. It's built on the side of a hill, a small mountain, and we wanted to show that in the background of both the shots of the interview. And the problem is the platform that we were on had a fence or something to keep you from falling over down, which is fair.
It's a good idea.
So we actually got tables, and we put both the interviewer and the interviewee on tables, so you wouldn't know it, looking at the shot, but we have some behind the scenes shots of like people just elevated above, so you can see the town in the background.
I had a question for you. Throughout your trip, what's the bathroom situation like in these different villages that you're visiting? It's reality. I wanted to ask.
I try not to go to the bathroom during the day. But
I'm a pretty dehydrated person in general.
I do that on purpose.
Trips, it's intentional because you don't really know if you're going to have a good place to use the bathroom when you're just out in the middle of nowhere all day. In India, the squat pot is prevalent. Not a hater of the squat pot, but
it takes a little effort. You really got to work your legs out.
Comfort zones are definitely
it's not what we're used to, but there was never a situation where I was like, oh no, in general
it's effective.
It's pretty good.
You're going from site to site, getting these different stories. Are we talking like a solid 8-hour workday, or what are how much of the day are you working?
Between like travel and
I kind of consider it a 24-hour-a-day thing because your sleep is off. But your sleep is off, so sometimes you're not sleeping at night when you should be sleeping, and so you're just up. Then you're, traveling in a car, maybe sleeping some then, and
it can be easily a 12, 14-hour day.
Like backing up footage at night, we're charging stuff at night.
And there was some significant drives on this trip. Was that in Andhra Pradesh, or was that somewhere else?
There was drives everywhere.
This was
there was some driving in Andhra Pradesh, but the longest one was the drive from the airport in Mizoram to Pine Hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's get there. Let's go to Mizoram. First of all, where is Mizoram? How is it different from sort of the rest of India that people might think of?
So there's a cluster of states in the northeast, and they're connected to India by a tiny little land bridge. And so that cluster is pretty secluded from kind of India heartland. Also culturally, it has more similarities to like Bangladesh, Myanmar, the countries around it, than it would really to the rest of India. So, they speak a language called Mizo instead of Hindi. They 90% of people in that state are Christian, which is very different from the rest of India, which is dominantly Hindu. So very different, and geographically too, extremely hilly. It's part of the Himalayan foothills, so it looks very different than the rest of India.
The people look different from, I don't want to say mainland India, but the, larger land structure. What was the story at Pine Hill?
Pine Hill is a school, and it is relatively close to the border with Myanmar. Pine Hill has 350 students. Most of them are local students from the town of New Champai, and but they do have 35 students who are refugees from Myanmar. So Myanmar has been having a civil war for 77 years. And these are kids, some of them, their parents have come across the border as well and are living elsewhere in India, and their kids are at Pine Hill. Some of them, their whole family is back in Myanmar, and they were sent to Pine Hill because it's a safer place for them to get an education. And so the story of Pine Hill is really twofold. It's really transforming the prospects of local students who are able to receive a Christian education, but also a super quality education. And these are kids who are coming from agricultural backgrounds. A lot of their families are farmers, and so with an education, they just have more options for what they want to do after school. And then, of course, the refugees, the impact is very significant, but also different. It's safety. It's a place where they don't have to worry about attacks anymore, and they can be around people who they can trust, and
it's really this beautiful haven on top of this hill. I mean, it's secluded, and I don't know, is this footage that we're seeing if you're watching on YouTube?
It's right.
Oh, that's it. Isn't
right
that it? Straight ahead on the hill?
No, that's another hill. It's actually right behind this shot. So it is right there. It's just on the other. It's on the other side of this shot.
Speaking of this, if you are watching on YouTube, it's a beautiful shot. I mean, there's mist, there's sun rays that are coming over the mountains. Leah, I was going to ask you, how big of a role does the time of day play in choosing when we shoot?
Yeah. So this is a really big deal to me. I like mornings and in the evenings. When the sun is low, you get a lot more shadows on the landscape, and that makes for just you see more depth, and you see the landscape and everything really better because of those shadows. That's like our eyes perceive depth and everything because of shadows, not because of light, really. So when the light's on top, it just kind of flattens everything out, and mornings and evenings.
So if it was up to you, sunrise.
Yeah, I would stop the sun. Just
9:30 a.m. and then take a break, come back later afternoon.
And we have sometimes done that, especially in Africa, because it gets really hot, first of all, and second of all, you just get nicer footage in the mornings and evenings. But
just thinking about the shot here that you're getting right now, how do these aerials help when you're putting a television show together?
They really do help. There was a time where we couldn't have any kind of aerial footage unless we rented a helicopter, and that was very rare because it was very expensive. And with the advent of drones and them getting more advanced, that really helps us cover a lot of parts in the script where things aren't as straightforward, or we don't have footage and we're talking about the area. It really lets the viewers see it from a different perspective that you wouldn't have been able to do just a few years ago. So,
since we're talking about drones, is there any challenges of flying a drone in another country? Is it easier, or is it more problematic, or?
Yeah, it really does depend on the country. India has had some rules against drones and foreigners bringing in drones as well, but those rules have changed over time and evolved, and we were actually able to take our drone this time, which is very nice, because it's nice to use your own gear that you've been using and you're used to, and then there are still some countries that don't let you take anything aerial in, which is fair, but yeah, it's never fun.
So back to Pine Hill, Sidney, what are we doing? What is Maranatha doing at Pine Hill?
So while we were there, we saw the foundation of an elementary education center, which is going to be a 10 classroom building. The classrooms will surround like a central auditorium, and this is the largest structure we build, because Pine Hill needs more space to take on more students. There's a lot of Adventists in that area who want to send their kids to the school, and they just can't. Both the principal and the Adventist conference president said, people ask us like, we want to send our kid here, and there's just not enough room. So Maranatha is building this building, and it's going to take right now enrollments 350, and it's going to raise it to potentially about 500. So the impact of this one building on that school is going to be huge.
What were the students like at this school?
They were funny.
They were hilarious. They were truly
funny.
Some of the coolest kids you'll meet. Like they were so open and so easy to talk to, and funny, like you said. They were so funny.
I feel like we kind of ideally would like to just blend into the background, capture our shots. We don't want them to like change their behavior too much because we're there. These students like just could not keep their cool when the camera moved to them. Like every time it like moved, they would be like, oh, and just like freak out.
Put their hands in front of their face.
They were just like good natured, and they would approach us like super friendly. I hadn't experienced that before. They would approach us, like test out their English, the like English phrases they knew because they're learning English at school and stuff. And so because of the students, like it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Fun to interview, fun to them showing us, where they live in the dorms and stuff.
Speaking of living conditions, I wanted to ask what your guys' accommodations throughout this whole trip was like. Because you're moving from state to state, things are going to change about, the kinds of,
was worse than mine.
The kinds of places that you stay.
We need to insert an image of the dungeon.
I'll try to get you pictures of the things that we're talking about, so you can so people can follow along. But
we stayed in hotels that were nice for most of the trip. For the time where we were at Pine Hill, we stayed at a guest house on the campus, and I don't think it's used too much. I was told that they kind of made some improvements to it to get it ready for us. We call it the dungeon because my room was like a tiny like stone box, basically, I was never there. I only slept there, so it wasn't really a big deal. But visually, it was just a bit entertaining.
She'd have to like, from coming outside, she'd have to go through my room to get to her room. So it was a little, she's like, hey, Leo, you good?
Announcing myself. Like every time. Shower situation there was a whole process. We had like a stick with what do they call it?
It's like a coil that was just that just warmed the water, but it was hanging on that stick that you were talking about.
There was a stick
like in a bucket?
in a bucket to warm our water because, we want warm water for our showers. We're not strong enough for cold showers, but and then it would take like 45 minutes to an hour to warm the water. So, and then two of us, so it was just, a whole thrilling routine that we went through.
Back to the students, specifically about the refugees. Did you hear some pretty heavy stories from those students?
Yeah. We interviewed one kid, and I asked him the preliminary questions, and then I asked him about the violence that he had experienced back home. And then he was speaking in Mizo, so I didn't know it at the time. But then going and reading the translated transcripts back here, his answer was interesting because he kind of said at the beginning, he's like, well, if you want to go there, kind of. He's like, well, if you want to talk about the dangers. Then he just, started listing off bombings in the streets, gunfights, all the time. Just all these things that he had been exposed to. And it's almost it seemed like it was something that he had kind of put in a box in his mind. And when he went answering that way, saying, oh, you want to go there? He just opened that box with all those things. And it's hard to hear descriptions of that kind of thing from kids. it just, something about it just feels so wrong, you know? Like,
I was going to ask you, like, did that affect you at all? Like, you're interviewing this kid, but you're also working and you're probably wrapped up in a lot of details. Like, are you able to be present enough for that to impact you, or is it hard?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it does impact me. Like I said, when you're sitting down having a conversation with a kid, like a teen, and you think about how old they are, and then I'm thinking about, like, you know, my siblings or my cousins who are that age, and then hearing, you know, the things they're describing, yeah, it's hard not to be impacted by it. And I want to sit with them and talk so much longer and ask questions just for me. But we can't, you know, because we're on a strict schedule. Like, we have to get what we need. And so it's kind of hard sometimes to have to be efficient when you don't want to be, when you'd rather just, like, take more time, you know, to really, like, know them and be there for them. But yeah, it's I consider it an intense blessing to be able to hear these firsthand accounts of experiences that I haven't and probably will never know anything about. And so I'm honored that I get to hear from them, and them being vulnerable and honest about these things. But yeah, it is hard to then just, like, pack up and leave and, like, reinstate that level of distance, you know, from what's happening.
Were you guys cognizant of the fact that you were, like, very close to a border where there was violence happening?
Yeah,
Yeah.
We kept checking, you know, Google Maps or whatever, and seeing how close we were, and yeah, it's definitely an odd feeling knowing you're that close to conflict, and you know, and some of the people in the interview would describe, yeah, we've heard bombings just over the hill, we've seen flashes, that kind of thing. So it's present for them, and we get to leave and don't have to worry about it here, but they don't, like, they're stuck there, you know.
We saw, like, bus loads of soldiers, you know, on the road, those kind of things. So yeah, there was evidence everywhere that this may be across the border from where this, you know, civil war is taking place, but the effects are far-reaching.
Were you limited in where you could fly the drone because of stuff going on, or?
Yeah, there were places we just couldn't fly because of a military presence or a base or something. Yeah, we could look out and see Myanmar. Yeah, but we couldn't really fly drones close to the border.
Yeah. So you spend your time at Pine Hill gathering stories there, interviewing students, principal, leaders, and then you also covered a couple more water well stories in that area. Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell us about those.
Okay, so the first one we covered, that was the closest we got to the border with Myanmar, and it was like 3 miles away.
Yeah,
as I remember, it was very close.
You could see it.
Yeah. And so at that site, they got water from the government, just wasn't enough for everyone. During the rainy season, they would collect what they could off of their roofs to supplement it. During the dry season, there's, like, a stream that's 7 kilometers, I don't know how many miles that is, but below their village, that if you couldn't afford to have that water delivered or pumped, you know, to your home, you have to walk for that water. And so a very intense need for water there, which was intensified further by a population of refugees who are living there. Because it is so close to the border, it's kind of a convenient place to settle for people who are fleeing violence. And it's interesting to think about, you know, like, having to leave your home, finding a new one that probably is just so much better because your life isn't threatened, but also you don't have enough water, you know? So it's just, you know, all these things that they have to think about. But on the topic of drone shots, we wanted to get shots of this refugee camp in this village, and it just wasn't advisable. But we did send one of our staff members to go and take some pictures of it and things like that, so we could at least kind of show it in the episode that we'll make about it. But yeah.
So you guys have captured everything that you need to capture, you hope, or how do you know, at what point do you kind of exhale and think, okay, we did it?
I still haven't. Because
it's like, do we really exhale? I think we exhale fully when the show is edited and done.
Yeah.
And everything's delivered and
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sketchy sometimes. Like we make lists and we have lists that are shared between the phones. So if she adds something to the list, I'll see it pop up just
as far as shots.
Yeah, as far as shots that we need to get, things like that. But you're on your way home and you're still, after a certain amount of experience, you feel good about it, but you just never want to be too sure until you're absolutely done.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it's hard on a trip like this when you're traveling from place to place. You can't necessarily go back and get footage that you realize, oh shoot, that would have been good to have.
Yeah.
So that adds a layer of stress in the moment too. You're like, I'm here for the next hour or two, and that's all I'll have at this site.
You'll never be back. Yeah.
Yeah. So until I've written, but even after I write it, until I see like the cut and be like, okay, like we have the shots, to make this story make sense. Like then I'm like, okay, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. You might not even stop for water, food, anything. Like while you're on that site, you're just getting everything you can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Leo, I meant to ask you another technical question earlier. This is out of order here, but because we're wrapping up, you guys have been awesome. Thank you.
Ending with the good old technical question.
Yeah, I know, right? No, this is not
technical.
This is not the last.
You've all been
this
waiting.
Is not the last.
Everyone wants to know about this.
It's not the last question, but when we're in our studio here recording this podcast, if you're watching on video, there's lights. You can light things well. Out in the field, we don't have studio lighting. So how do you light things well so it looks good?
So in the field, we're generally just trying to use the environment to get good lighting. Since we don't have enough crew and space really in the trucks that we run in to have lots of lighting equipment. It would be nice, but it's just not really practical for the style of run and gun shooting that we do, more documentary style. So we use reflectors. So we try to use the sun and reflect sun at people, or diffuse the light so it's a little softer on people's faces. And then windows in a darker room, you have a window hitting somebody, and you could, after a while you kind of figure out ways to make people look as good as possible for an interview or for whatever you're shooting. But yeah, it's fun.
And with limited crew being you, as far as the technical expert, sometimes there's other people, local people, some Maranatha staff holding boom mics
people trying to train them, like the mic needs to be exactly here because, you're trying to explain it, and it's kind of tough, but
Okay. Last couple questions here. Leo, you kind of already talked about it, so maybe you don't even have to answer this question, but how do you know it was a successful trip?
I think I get a gut feeling when I feel like I've gotten a critical mass of footage collection. Obviously, I talk to, in this case, Sydney a lot to make sure that she's also comfortable, because her being comfortable with what we've done makes me very comfortable. So, because she's going to have to write the story, and that's a big responsibility. So I want to make sure that I can do my job so she can do hers. So,
okay. And this is the last question to Sydney.
Sydney,
you've been to India before, but these were different states you went to this time. Saw a lot of things. This is your third trip. What are the things you see and the people you talk to do to you personally? How did it impact you?
Like I mentioned earlier, the chance to just meet individuals is so impactful for me, because in school, I'm international relations and history major. So in school, I remember lectures talking about like world events, but it's such a bird's eye view of things that happen in our world. And in this role that I have, I'm able to meet the individuals who are experiencing these things that are happening in the world. And that's so impactful for me, because I feel like the chance for me to give them the chance to share their stories and kind of have their voice heard is special. It's super special. So I think that's the most impactful part. I think I remember telling Leo like that my favorite part is interviews, and of course he's thinking about it from a technical perspective of like, oh, they're kind of a pain to like get the lighting right and everything and like set up all this equipment. But I'm just thinking about, okay, like I can't wait to meet this person. I can't wait to like hear about their life and like and what they feel about things. And so the people I met, probably the kids from Pine Hill, who I was able to interview, impacted me the most. One quick story. So we were interviewing a girl who's featured in our episode about Pine Hill, so you'll get to hear her whole story.
And we'll put that link in the show notes so you can watch it.
Now you have to. We were getting some B-roll of her. That's just like shots to kind of cover her interview clips and stuff. And we were in her dorm room filming her, talking about these pictures she had of her parents and her friends back home that she keeps with her to like remember them by. And during this shot, I asked her to just explain to your friend who these people are to you. And she's speaking another language, but all of a sudden, like, her energy dies down, and then she just starts crying because she misses them a lot and she's scared for them. And so I think those moments of just authenticity from individuals about the things happening in the world around them I feel very honored to get to witness and kind of be a part of sharing those stories.
Beautiful. Well, Leigh, you did it. You were able to pull off this show and be a guest at the same time. Congratulations.
I hope it wasn't too distracting.
You did great. You did great. Thank you both for giving us a little bit of behind the scenes of what it's like to go on one of these media collection trips, these TV trips, and what it's like. So appreciate you being here and sharing. And for anyone listening or watching, if you enjoyed this show, make sure to share it with a friend. Make sure to subscribe and maybe leave us a review. It helps us out.
A good review.
A good review specifically.
If you have a bad one, no. We don't want it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.